But obviously, you know, there are little tweaks that you have to make here and there, and a lot of that relates to stuff like word plays, puns. If you've been watching anime for very long, you know they just love that. They love to do puns and plays on words and all of that stuff that just makes you want to rip out your eyeballs, honestly. But the whole idea with something that's a pun or a play on words is that it's using nuances of that particular language. And so when you directly translate what has been said, it's just nonsense. It doesn't even, it makes absolutely no sense. So if you just translated exactly what it was, and I do have a favorite example that I like to use, which is, there's a show I worked on several years ago called Sister Princess. And it's a comedy. It's a weird, kind of a harem show, but there's like this kind of oddball comic relief character in the show, and there's one point when he just appears on the screen. It's really kind of an out-of-the-blue thing, but okay, now you really have to follow this. Okay, so he's dressed as Detective Conan, okay? He's dressed as Detective Conan. The character's like a big, nerdy, fanboy type guy. So he's dressed as Detective Conan. He's riding a skateboard, because Detective Conan rides a skateboard. So, riding the skateboard into the scene, he stops for a moment and he says something like, "You know, my turtle is always telling me," and then he laughs, and then it's over. It was that much. It was just a couple seconds, and what the hell was that? Okay, this is what it was. Okay, so he's dressed as Detective Conan. There's a pun, because turtle and wife sound very similar in Japanese. Please notice that turtle and wife do not sound the same in English. He's doing an impression of the Japanese actor who dubbed Peter Falk in Columbo. Now, Columbo is a detective. So he's dressed as Detective Conan, and he's doing an impression of the Japanese actor who dubbed Peter Falk as Detective Columbo. And one of the things, if you ever watched Columbo, that he was always referencing his wife. He would always, so I don't remember, did we see her? I think, wasn't it, what's her face, Kate Mulgrew or something was his wife? Anyway, so he would always be talking about his wife. And so as the third level of this Detective Conan, Detective Columbo, the third level of it was about the wife is a like my turtle tells me such and such instead of my wife tells me such and such. And I looked at that and said, oh my God, what the hell am I going to do with this? You know, he has to come in here, he has to say something that's like 7 or 8 syllables, and it's done. It has no bearing on the rest of the story. It's just like some little random bit. And still, the actor, Greg Ayers, has got to say something. He's got to say something. And the point of it is that it's a really lame joke. That's kind of a pun. And this, I tell you what, I thought on this for days. It was difficult. And I thought, well, I couldn't think of any way, how can you make like some kind of wife and turtle pun? And I had to, I've got to discard that and think of what else I can do with this. So, hoping that someone may know that he's dressed as Detective Conan, I talked to Greg and I said, how do you feel about doing a Peter Falk impersonation? And it turns out he has a good friend who's a huge Columbo fan, who has like a catalog of like every, you know, Columbo TV show and movie. So he went over and he watched several hours of Columbo to get this Peter Falk impersonation. And the line ended up being something like, well, just in case we don't know that he's doing a Peter Falk impersonation, it was something like, you know what Mrs. Columbo is always telling me, ha, ha, ha. And that really ended up being basically the line. Thankfully, that doesn't happen in every single episode that you work on, because I think you would ultimately end up throwing yourself in front of a bus probably. But I mean, that's just one like crazy example of something that's in there, and however weird and off the wall it may be, they have to say something. And you know, if you can figure out a way that they can say something and it kind of conveys the general idea of what you want to get across, then hopefully you've done a good job with it. Now, Sister Princess was interesting for several reasons. That there's this kid who, in Japan, when you're going to high school, you take like an entrance exam to get into high school, and so he's very confident about the school that he wants to go to, and so he's only applied to one school, and when he took the entrance exam, apparently he was one off on every single answer, coloring in, you know, the little bubbles, so he totally fails his exam, and now he has nowhere to go for high school. Suddenly, these men in black show up, throw him in the back of the van, take him off to this mysterious island, and he's now living in this enormous mansion where he suddenly discovers that he apparently has 13 sisters. Okay, you know, happens to most of us all the time. So he shows up on this island, he meets all these girls, and they're apparently his sisters, and so every single one of them has a term that they refer to him as that is brother in some way. So I had this whole chart that was done up by the head translator at ADV at the time that showed like what each of the sisters, it was in the order of most formal to least formal. So the most formal sister, Haruko, which is who I ended up playing, was like Anagimi-sama, which we translated as beloved brother, and the least formal was Mami, who was the fake sister, and she called him Bud. Anyway, so we had a whole, so every single one of these sisters could only refer to him by whatever the thing was, like bro, or big bro, or bro, brother, beloved brother, brother dear, dear brother. I don't even remember them all now. This is why I had the chart. Anyway, so that was really tricky because sometimes that was the only thing that they would be saying is like, oh, brother, and then, you know, or whatever their term was, and there wouldn't be the right number of lip flaps for it. But God, that was, oh man, that show was mental.